All right. Well, again, good morning, Epic Church. It's a joy always. It really is. Just to start the week with you, let me welcome everybody online again as well. And as I just mentioned, especially if you're online, you can access those message notes, epicchurchbuffalo.com/online. Those might be helpful to follow along with today. But as we are winding down this summer at Epic teaching series, today, we're going to sort of build on what we talked about last Sunday. And if you missed last Sunday, let me just kind of quickly summarize. And of course, you can get the whole message if you missed that online. But to quickly summarize last Sunday, we said that the word Christian can be sort of a confusing word in our culture, right? You ask 20 different people what Christian means, you might get 20 different answers. And to some, of course, it's tied to certain political views. And to others, Christian is just about a bunch of do's and don'ts. And to others, it's just a religion. And to some, and even like in this room right now, based on our experience, some have a positive view toward the word Christian and some have a negative view toward the word Christian. But what we talked about last Sunday was simply this, that in the first century, followers of Jesus really didn't go by the word Christian. It was sort of a label that those who didn't follow Jesus put on those who did. Instead, those first followers of Jesus went by a different word, and we talked about the word disciple. Disciples who responded to the call of Jesus to follow him and to follow after this new commandment that Jesus gave, to love God and to love others. And that's what we talked about last Sunday. And so instead of just kind of thinking about Christian and what that word does mean or doesn't mean or what it's supposed to mean, the question we said is this: what if we rebranded our faith from that to filtering everything we do through this question: what does disciple require of me? What does disciple require of me? So today, to build on that, here's what I want to talk about. I want to talk about today the cost of a disciple. If last Sunday was about like seeing ourselves as not just Christians, but disciples, the cost today of a disciple. Let me start here. So in North Korea, in the city of Pyongyang, there is there's a hotel there known as the Hotel of Doom. That's a nice name, isn't it? And you see the picture right there. Why is it called that? Well, let me just say this. It's called this. It's the tallest unoccupied structure in the world. I want to be sure to get that right. And it was designed, when they started like the plans for this, it was designed to have 3,000 rooms, multiple casinos, nightclubs, 5 revolving restaurants. It was originally designed to go against or to kind of stand up to the Eiffel Tower and the Empire State Building. Had all these grand plans. Construction began in 1987. But because of economic problems and other disputes, other things that were happening, construction completely stopped. In fact, from I think it was 1993 to 2008, stopped just altogether. Like no windows, no fixtures, just nothing. Just this building. It didn't even look like that. The picture that you see, just a rusted crane at the top of the building. Then I think 21 years after construction began for this building, it started again, and they had hopes for like a grand opening in 2013, but that came and that went, and nothing really, this structure just stood there. In fact, I think it was about 7 years ago or so, there were some pictures revealed on the inside of this building. You see the outside, here's the inside, just kind of bare concrete, right? Nothing there. The opening came, and why do I bring all this up? Well, we're centered around the idea of that they started some construction, right? They started these big plans, but they didn't finish. And here's why I bring that up. There was a moment once when Jesus was around some other people. And it was this time in history when all these people, Jesus is around, and people are wondering who he was and what he's all about. What does following him actually mean? And Jesus shared these words. He was not talking about this hotel in North Korea, but here's what he said. He said, "Don't begin until you count the cost. For who would begin construction of a building without first calculating the cost to see if there is enough money to finish it? Otherwise, you might complete only the foundation," he said, "before running out of what? For running out of money. And then everybody would, say it with me, would laugh at you. We're talking about you in a message in Buffalo, New York, years later. And they would say, there's the person who started that building and couldn't afford to finish it." Now, as I said, obviously, Jesus was not talking about a building that is called the Hotel of Doom in North Korea when he said that, but let me again give you some context, okay? So in this time when Jesus is sharing these words, he's a polarizing figure. Like everyone wanted to be around him. Some believed he was sent from God. Others weren't quite sure what to make of him. Many were skeptical, but everybody was trying to figure out, like, who is this guy and what is he all about? And so as people are around him and Jesus is there, he talks to them and he basically says, it's basically saying this, guys, I know you like the miracles and like I know you like the teaching and all of that, and maybe you're drawn to, like, you're just attracted to what I'm doing and all of that, but he would basically say these words, but make no mistake. If you want to follow me as a disciple, if you want to say yes to faith in me and follow after me, make no mistake, Jesus would say. Don't begin until you count the cost. Don't say yes. Don't start moving forward until you count the cost. I think of this building that we're all in right now, for those of us who are, like, in the room right now. Like, when we started the plans to renovate this former like auto center, we had a plan in place as far as, like, how much it would cost and how long it would take and how the work would get done. So we didn't just, like, start the work and say, hey, we'll just do our best and, like, hopefully it goes well, but if it doesn't, we'll just go back to the movie theater, right? That wasn't really, like, how we went about it. There was a plan in place, and we wouldn't have moved forward, right? And people wouldn't have been a part of it unless we felt like that we could actually do it, right? If we didn't have, let me say it this way, like if we couldn't handle the cost of what it would take, then we wouldn't have moved forward. And in a similar way, Jesus would say, don't begin until you count the cost. Now, I think we understand this principle of what we're talking about today as we think about, like, different areas of life. I really do. See, there's a question that we ask all the time in our lives, and sometimes without even knowing it. So before we make a financial purchase, we ask this question. Before a decision, like with our family or with our friends or maybe at school or whatever it is, no matter if we're young or old today, there's a question we often ask before we decide to do something, before we, like, in a decision even to, like, between ice cream and vegetables, there's a question that we ask. You know what the question is? Is it worth it? Is it worth it? It's a question we ask all the time. Whether the decision is major or minor, we compare the benefits and the cost, and we ask, is it worth it? Is it worth it? And this is a question basically that Jesus posed to his disciples. He was with his closest disciples in another instance, and here's what he said to them, Matthew 16, verse 24. He said to his disciples, whoever wants to be my disciple must what? Deny themselves, take up their cross, and follow me. Now, can we just be honest for a second today? That doesn't sound like much fun. Maybe it does to you. It doesn't to me. I think a lot of us are like, well, follow me, like I can live with that. But deny myself, and take up my cross? Like, Jesus, can we talk about heaven or something instead? Like, can we stick with Christian instead of disciple? Because that doesn't sound like a whole lot of fun. Now, here's what we need to know today. Those followers of Jesus, those early disciples, they would have known in the context of that day exactly what he meant when he used that phrase, take up their cross. Because under the Roman Empire which they lived, crucifixion was a common form of execution, and the condemned criminal had to carry their cross to the execution site before that happened. So they would have known exactly what he meant when he said, to take up your cross. And then here's what history shows us. That following Jesus, of course, even when he walked the earth, there was a cost to it. And then even in the first century, as time went on, that cost intensified. And then about 30 years after Jesus walked the earth, when Emperor Nero was in control of the Roman Empire, the persecution of Jesus' followers was out of control. Believers burned alive and thrown in arenas in front of lions. Just persecution just out of control for like 4 different reasons. And we know this today, that even in other parts of the world, persecution among Jesus' followers, like, it's intense. Now, I know what some of us are thinking right now, like, Mark, this is intense right now. Just like, what's the next series? Like, when are we getting to that? And I get it. And thankfully, we live in a country where, like, we're not in physical danger for faith in Jesus. But don't miss this today, Epic Church, okay? Don't miss this today. There's still a cost. There's still a commitment to follow after Jesus. Now, whether we're like here today in the room or watching online right now, I get this today. I understand that Like we're all in different places when it comes to our faith and our spiritual journey, where we're at. Some of us, like we're new to faith, or maybe we've been following Jesus for a long time. Some of us are returning to faith, or maybe we're in a season where we're searching, or we're considering, or okay, wherever we're at today. Here's what I want to do today. I just want to give you 3 questions. 3 questions about the commitment, about the cost to follow after Jesus, that for us to just consider today. Again, this is not what Christian necessarily means. This is not how many think of Christian in our culture, but what it means to be a disciple. 3 questions really based on those words of Jesus when he said to follow me and to not deny yourself and take up your cross. And then at the end of our time today, at the end of the message, I've just had this kind of stirring in my spirit for these last few days just to encourage, very specifically, just the people in this room and those online today as well. We'll get to that at the end, but I want to start first just with 3 questions. So ask yourselves this, okay? When the cost of a disciple, the first question we have to ask ourselves today is this: am I willing to be second? The cost of disciple, am I willing to be second? What did Jesus say? He said, if you want to follow me, you have to first deny yourself. Am I willing to be second? Here's how Jesus said it a different way in Matthew 10:24. He said, a disciple is not above his teacher, nor a servant above his master. In other words, following Jesus comes with an understanding. We have to remind ourselves of this sometimes, that life is not all about us. And let's be honest, this is not easy. I don't know about you, okay, but for me, pride comes easier than humility. Selfishness comes easier for me than selflessness. It just does. Now, we know this, that like during this whole COVID season that we've been in and everything happening, unfortunately, one of the things that's happened are some businesses that have had to close down. And one of the businesses I've heard of, like locally, that has had to close down was Chuck E. Cheese. How many of you heard this, at least locally? Now, that brought up some memories for me because some of you have heard me say this before, but like my first job when I was 16 years old was at a Chuck E. Cheese. You can laugh if you want to. It's okay. Like, I'm over. I'm trying to practice humility today, just reminding myself. Not only was one of my first jobs, let me say this, one of the worst days of my entire life was at Chuck E. Cheese when I first started working there. One of the most humbling days ever. And the day kind of started like this when I got there. My boss came up to me and said, Mark, I know you don't normally do this. Because I was a game attendant, everybody, okay? So, like, if you got your token stuck in a machine or tickets or something like that, and you wanted to lie to the game attendant and tell how many tickets you're supposed to have or tokens, like I was your guy. I helped you out for that. But my boss came up to me one day and said, Mark, I know you don't normally do this, but we need you to be Chucky today. I was like, you're right. I don't normally do that. I'm not doing that. I was like, what do you mean be Chucky today? Well, put on the suit. Just put it on, go around, start interacting with all the kids and the families. I said, I'm not doing that. They said, you are doing that. And so I put Chucky on, and like it was hot, and it smelled, and it was terrible. Like it was just awful. And like the ironic thing is, like on the outside, Chucky got this huge smile, right? But on the inside, like I'm ready to kill the next kid who pulls my tail or slaps me across the face. That's how bad it was. But like, what was I going to do, right? I could have quit, I guess, but I just humbled myself and did a bad job being Chucky that day. Now, don't hear what I'm not saying, okay? Obviously, Jesus is not asking us to do like silly things like that or put whatever, okay? But let me say it like this. If we're going to follow after Jesus, we just have to know that there will be times when the commitment, the cost means that we are going to have to choose his will above our will and the needs of others above our needs. Are we willing to choose humility? Am I willing to be second? In the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus further paints the picture of what following him means. And the context of this is crazy because Jesus had just got done telling his disciples that he's about to be arrested and beaten and tried and eventually crucified. All of these horrible things are going to happen to him. And the disciples basically respond to him and say, hey, Jesus, would you tell us how to be great in your kingdom? Like, I'm sorry all this stuff is about to happen to you, but Jesus, like, how can we be remembered as great? And he responds to them, he says, okay, you want to know? You want to know what greatness looks like in my kingdom? And he tells them, hey, this world is all about power and prestige and position and doing everything you got to do to get it, but my kingdom is different. And here's what Jesus says to them. He says, among you, it'll be different. Whoever wants to be a leader or first among you must be your, say it with me, your servant. And whoever wants to be first among you must become your slave. For even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve others, and to give his life as a ransom for many. Jesus basically says here, you want to be first in my kingdom? be second. Be a servant. We say this all the time here. You are never more like Jesus than when you are serving somebody else. I'll just tell you this. It's really always been the case since we started the church almost 7 years ago. It's still the case today. No doubt. My most enjoyable thing that I get to do just as pastor of this church is whether it's on Sundays or during the week or whatever it is, and watch different people serving in different positions. I think about just even this past week and watching people who were serving, cleaning the building beforehand. And even this morning, people serving in Epic Kids or on the guest services team or on the production team or whatever it is. It's the most enjoyable thing I get to do, watching people serve. Do their part to serve other people. And again, I know that we're in kind of a weird season right now with COVID and all of that and transitioning, just the transition season that we're in and all of those different things. But I can tell you that there is still a role for that right now as well. And not just here in the church, in every walk of life. That we humble ourselves and we're ready to serve. By the way, even if you're watching online, you're here in the room and you don't have a place to serve yet, those teams I just mentioned, like cleaning team and guest services and production, kids team, okay, there's places for that. But here's the question for you and I. Am I willing to be second? Am I willing to put His will above my will? Can I just be honest with you today, Epic Church? Most people in our culture today, most people who call themselves Christians, can't answer yes to that question. Am I willing to be second? Here's the second question we have to consider today when it comes to the cost of following Jesus. And the question is this: am I willing to surrender? Am I willing to be second, and am I willing to surrender? And I know that's not a fun word, surrender, but let me ask you to do this today, okay? I want you to think about the things that you value most in life. Think about those things. Think about the things that are most important. It may be your greatest accomplishments. It may be the things that you're most proud of. It may be your family. It may be your relationships. It may be your degree or an educational achievement. It may be a sport or activity that you're involved in or something like that. It may be that you started a business or you overcame an addiction, okay? Whatever it is for you, I don't know what that is for you, but think about it. The things that you value the most, even though I don't know what that is, here's what I do know. It cost you something. It cost you something. If it is of value, even if it was worth it, even if you do it again, it cost you something. I think of the decision that I made, and thankfully she made, to marry my wife, Rebecca. Like, I would make that decision 100 times out of 100. Like, it was an easy decision, still would be today, but can I tell you something? Like, with that, there was a cost with that decision. There was a cost with that commitment. And I'm not just talking about the engagement ring, although that cost was real as well, okay? Like, there's a cost. Like, we can't just wake up and then we'll just do whatever we want to do. Like, I can't just wake up in the morning and go on a 7-day golf trip and just, without discussing it first. If I do, there will be a different cost associated to that. And I'm glad I made the commitment. I do it again, but there is still anything of value in our lives. There is a cost associated to it. Let me say it this way. In order to gain something of value, you have to give up something else. You've heard it said before, if you want to go up, you've got to give up. Am I willing to surrender? Let's look at another example of Jesus teaching this. So a man approached Jesus once and said, "Teacher, what do I have to do to inherit eternal life?" And Jesus sort of gives like a half answer at first. Well, follow all the commandments. And the guy's like, "I've done that." Jesus says this to him in Matthew 19. "If you want to be perfect, go and sell all your possessions, give money to the poor, and you'll have treasure in heaven. Then come and follow me." When the young man heard this, what happened? He went away sad, for he had many possessions. Now here's what Jesus knew. For that man, his trust in his wealth was greater than his trust in God. And the man walked away sad because perhaps he knew, I just cannot surrender this to God. Maybe he was thinking, I've worked too hard for this. Like, it means too much to me. I just can't see myself but for whatever the reason was, I cannot surrender this to God. Now, one of the things, let me just say this. This might sting a little bit, but it stung a little bit for me too. One of the things that concerns me as a pastor sometimes, and we've all done this in an honest moment, we all have, but especially in the culture today, as many followers of Jesus, sometimes we have a habit of picking and choosing like the teachings of Jesus that we like and the ones that we don't. Almost like it's like a spiritual truth buffet or something. Like, I'll take the grace, and I'll take the love, and I'll take the mercy, and the eternal life, and the forgiveness. Like, I'm good with that. But, like, pursuing holiness, or things I don't really want to do, or the things that really, I don't really agree with, or the things that aren't mainstream, like, maybe I'll kind of leave those for somebody else. It's easy, isn't it? To pick and choose the things we like, and to rationalize or justify the things that we don't like. Are we willing in those moments to say, Jesus, I'm just going to surrender this to you. I'm just going to say yes to you. In fact, maybe that's the tough question I'd ask of all of us today. I've been asking myself all week. Where do we need to surrender? Listen, it may be something that you're just worried about, just with the future. That you surrender that control to him. And maybe just as we get ready for the fall and something that's just causing anxiety and just the shift in transition, like heading to the fall, and it's just kind of got you up at night. Maybe today would be the day to surrender that to him. It could be an area of our life. It might be something else. Am I willing to surrender? Remember this today. The question is not, will we be perfect and never mess up again? The question is, am I willing to surrender? When Jesus said, deny yourself, take up your cross, kind of saying, am I willing to be second? Am I willing to surrender? Let me give you one more question today. It's this. Am I willing to say yes? Jesus said, hey, don't begin following me until you count the cost. Okay, so am I willing to be second, surrender, and am I willing to say yes? So imagine this for a moment. So imagine you're a fisherman. Everybody with me so far? And you're in the first century, and like all you've known your whole life is just kind of like it's the family business. It's this fisherman deal. And like it's the only thing you knew, and you spent your whole life doing it, and you think your whole life is going to be. And maybe you have this little thing within your heart that like you want to make a difference with your life, but you're not sure what it means. You're not sure what it would look like. And then all of a sudden this guy that you've seen and you've heard and you're maybe curious about, like he comes along and you've seen him, you know something is special about him. And then he comes along like while you're on the boat one day and looks you squarely in the eye and says this, hey, why don't you leave some of that fishing stuff behind for a while and come and follow me? Now I imagine that's probably not exactly how it went down with like Jesus and Peter, but similar. In fact, a little bit later, it says this in Matthew 4. A little further up the shore, he, meaning Jesus, saw two brothers, so this is after Peter, James and John, sitting in a boat with their father Zebedee repairing their nets. And he called them to come too. And they immediately followed him, leaving the boat and their father behind. I always wondered like how their father felt about that. Like, hey, where are you going, guys? Like, I'm supposed to clean this up by myself? But they immediately follow Jesus. The crazy thing to me is that with those early disciples, come on, put yourself in their shoes. They had no clue what they were about to do, where they were about to go. They did not know what the next week was going to look like, the next month was going to look like. Jesus did not reveal the next plan to them, just the next step. Now, I don't know about you, but I'll just be honest with you. Like, if that's me, I'm not sure I would have been able to react a similar way. Like, I think a lot of us would say, Jesus, let me pray on it for a few weeks. I'll get back to you. And Jesus, before I give you this answer, can you tell me what the 5-year vision is? Can you tell me like the 10-year goal for this, like, you know, this little adventure that you're calling me to? What does that go, like, Jesus, something, like I'm a planner, Jesus. I need some details. That would probably be my response, but don't miss this today. He didn't reveal the whole plan, did he? Just the next step. Epic Church, as we relate this to our lives today, if there's something that you're in today, if he revealed the entire plan to you today, there would be no need for faith. Just the next step. Are you willing to say yes? You know, as we think about just in a few weeks, September 20th, celebrating just 7 years since we started Epic Church, I was thinking back to just kind of the time when we were kind of praying through and feeling like maybe God was calling us to be a part of starting this church. And I remember just all of the questions. And I remember that you don't know all of the details. You know how things are going to work out. Just knowing that God was just kind of waiting for a simple yes in that moment. You know, I think back to like questions at the time, like, man, how are we going to get this church off the ground? And like, how will my family survive financially? And like, you know, we may be able to make it in a movie theater for 1 year, but like, what about after that? Like, where are we going to meet? How's that going to happen? Like, what about the coronavirus when that comes? Like, what are we going to do then? Like, I didn't know about it at that time, but Listen, I'm grateful I didn't. Because sometimes, like, if you know all of those things, it might keep you from saying yes. And I can just tell you today that when it comes to even that season just in our lives, all he was looking for was just a simple yes. He wasn't going to reveal all of those, like all of the plans, just the next step. And here's what I believe. The same is true for you today. Maybe not in starting a church, but as you think about your lives, the same is true. So let me just ask you this today. Where do you just need to give the yes? Where do you just need to give the yes today? It may be with a decision that you and your family, you've been praying about, you've been thinking about, and you're not sure what it is. Maybe it's just the step to say yes, to trust in him. Maybe it's this yes. Maybe it's this yes. That God, before the fall comes, I'm going to say no to some of the worry, and I'm going to say yes to your peace before I even step into the fall. It may be saying yes with something else that is keeping you up at night or that you're frustrated about. It may be, our yes may be remembering what we have to be thankful for instead of fixating on what we don't. For some of us, it may be yes to saying faith in Jesus for the very first time. Here's the questions for today. Am I willing to be second? Am I willing to surrender? And am I willing to say yes? Jesus said, don't begin. Don't start building the hotel. Don't start renovating the auto center. Don't start following me until you count the cost. Now, let me just say this, because I want to encourage all of us here today, and all of you watching online right now as well. Honestly, plan on kind of wrapping us up like a little bit different today. Then I woke up Thursday morning, and just in my own just kind of time in Scripture and in prayer, just had a sense in my spirit where I can only just kind of say it like this. Just woke up with a burden for all of you in this room, all of you part of our church, all of you watching online as well. Like, and honestly pictured like this picture right now of you all in these seats and you all watching online, and just felt a burden just for all of us as we navigate this season. Because as we know, this has not been it's been a heavy season. There's a lot that I've been reading on lately, and I really believe this is true, that I don't think you and I were created to be able to handle like the amount of things that we just see in front of us each and every day. Because of like social media and the news and just the ability to see every problem in every part of the world at every moment of the day, like it's overwhelming. And I just believe this, that we weren't necessarily created to be able to handle all of that. And here's what I believe, that it's not on all of us, but on some, it's taking more of a toll than we even realize. This kind of like this perfect storm of things happening, of course, with the virus and other things happening, and the racial injustice and just the political tension, the hostility, and just all the back and forth. And then the murder hornets. And like, you can laugh, it's okay. And then like there's an asteroid that's supposed to come like right before Election Day, NASA says, just like it's like anything else. Like, here's the burden. Here's the burden I just kind of felt. To some extent, let me say it like this, to some extent, Jesus predicted this. And I'm not trying to discourage you, because I know some, Mark, I thought you were trying to encourage us with all this. Like, what's the deal? Like, I'm not trying to discourage you, but I also don't want to lie to you. To some extent, Jesus predicted this. He said before his return, the love of people would grow cold, and that things would not be great on this earth. So I don't want to lie to you, but here's what I want to encourage you with. The words of Jesus that some of you know already, but I want to read them to you. Let these sink into your heart in a fresh way. These are the words that were on my heart this Thursday morning. Here's what he said. In John 16, verse 33, he says, I've told you these things so that in me you may have peace. Notice what he said there. Not in the world. Not keep focusing on the things out there and keep reading the news and keep all that. Like, not on social media. There's not peace there. He said, in me you may have peace. In this world, what did he say? You'll have trouble, but take heart. I have overcome the world. Can I say this today at Big Church? Yes, there's a cost. There's a commitment to follow Jesus. But there's also a hope that can serve as an anchor for our souls. Amen? So let me just say this today. You don't have to be hopeless because you're not. You don't have to feel beaten down because you're not. Like some of us may feel like I'm ready to throw in the towel. You do not have to, because your God is with you. So if I could just encourage you today, keep heart, keep your eyes up, keep your courage, not in yourselves, but in Him. Because if those words are true, and I believe with everything in me that they are, but Jesus said that I have overcome the world, that changes everything as far as our perspective.